Hail and welcome back to Elder Futhark Rune Divination 101. Today we are going to be discussing Perthro. Fortunately, I have finally found the time to upload, another video, and it is likely that I will be uploading as many videos as possible over the coming weeks to progress with the Elder Futhark Rune Divination 101 series. After all, it's been about 2 years, and yeah. I basically promised the gods that I would try to finish this series, if it is at all within my capability to do so before the end of the year. And so expect to be seeing several more videos over the next few weeks. Anyway, let us begin. Today we are discussing, as I mentioned, Perthro, the Rune of Chance, Mystery, and Fate. That is a topic that spans obviously a lot of different subtopics, and we are going to try and dive into it as much as possible within the scope of these 101 videos. First, let's sum up some basic things about the rune Perthro. It is the 14th rune of the Elder Futhark, making it the 6th rune in the second 8. It is said that the exact meaning of Perthro is unknown to us in modern times. Now, according to the Anglo-Saxon rune poem, which was quoted at the beginning of this video, it appears to be a game of chance or some other sort of pot game. That is to say that the Piorf, as it is called in the Anglo-Saxon rune poem, is referring to a game of chance that was used in a pot, like Yahtzee or something like that, something similar. However, there are also those who interpret Perthro as being a vagina or womb, the place from which a person is born and where their life, destiny, and fate begin on this plane of existence. Another theory that exists is that the meaning was not actually lost to us, but that the meaning was quote-unquote vague on purpose. Meaning that Perthro is merely too complex to give a concrete explanation of, as it is in essence encompassing all of creation in some way, shape, or form, as the first cause that has had causes and effects after it. That is to say, from the moment that the world was created, there was a primal law that was basically founded after the first cause, which caused an effect, which caused the universe to form, which caused the universe to come into existence. And ever since then, there have been multiple causes stemming from the effects of that first cause that caused in themselves effects. And this was referred to as Orlog, which is basically the primal first law of cause and effect. And that is a very great understatement. I am very well aware of that. For those of you who are familiar with that term, it is a very basic gist of it explanation. So if you are interested in that, do a little bit of research on your own. It is spelled O-R-L-O-G, sometimes with an umlaut. So if you look into that, coupled with the word weird, that is W-Y-R-D, which we will also be addressing in this video because it also has a very strong relation to and connection with Perthro. You would probably find that interesting if you find this an interesting rune, and if you find it interesting what this rune and these ideas behind it represent. By the way, to define what weird is in a very basic, understating manner as well, a weird is someone's web of fate. That is to say, their weird starts being woven the moment that they are born, and that's where it ties into Piorf, or Perthro, in its interpretation as a womb or as a vagina, because you are born from your mother's womb, you are born from a vagina usually. Of course, nowadays we have C-sections, but back in the day that probably wasn't a very common thing. So these webs, the web of weirds, are spun by the Norns, the three Norns, Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld, the Norns of the past, present, and future, respectively. And it is said that rather than it being a predestination kind of destiny kind of deal, our weird is partially woven by ourselves, and it is partially woven by the situation of our parents, like what what status, what caste, what class they are born in. If you are born in poverty, you're going to have a very different upbringing outside of your control than someone who was born into into a rich family or into nobility back in the day, and even today in some countries. So these are things that are outside of your immediate control to fix until you, perhaps, if your country and if your society allows it, that you are capable of rising above these things. But that is not always possible, unfortunately. So here we are, and we are being influenced by one thing, but at the same time we also have our own free will that we can use to make our own decisions. And from those own decisions, we must always be willing to embrace the the effects of the causes that we caused by making the decisions in the first place. So it is not so much a predetermination, preordaining kind of deal as it would be in the modern day Judeo-Christian concept in that sense, as we are taught this by by certain religious groups. And it is more of a, well, it ties very strongly into the Orlog principle. It is a your birth is basically your own personal first cause, and from that everything else resonates and ripples. And likely it is the fact that you make certain decisions because of the way you were brought up, because of the morals that your parents instill in you, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, we are up against a little bit of a in-depth discussion of a very, very interesting rune. I must say that when I first started studying the runes, when I first started working with them, Perthro was the rune that confused me the most. And that is probably because it's supposed to. It is supposed to confuse you because it's basically telling you that there are multiple factors at play, multiple things that are influencing the situation, multiple ways of dealing with things, that sort of thing. So bear with me. To sum up some further points of Perthro, it is associated with the modern day letter of P, as in pot, or as in peas. Associated astrological planet is Saturn. The associated element is water, due to the rune's relation to intuition, divination, the ebbing and flowing of fate, as we have discussed it, weird, not destiny in that sense. Associated goddesses, because they're all goddesses, are Freya and Frigg, and that is in this rune's capacity as representing the vagina. Freya because of the sexual aspect that is obviously involved with the vagina, and then there is Frigg for motherhood and childbirth, stuff like that, as well as the three Norns, the Norn of the past, Urd, the Norn of the present, Verdandi, and the Norn of the future, Skuld. So that is in this rune's capacity as representing the weird and the web of fate, and as well as the Orlog, the universal law of cause and effect, as we have discussed. One last fact is that Perthro has a reverse and a converse, so we're in for a bit of a longer video than we were with Iwas. And yeah, so Perthro is a very complex rune, as you have hopefully already understood from the story that I told you earlier. It encompasses the web of fate, as mentioned. It encompasses a very feminine principle because it, directly represents the female genitalia. And so let us start with a basic rundown of what Perthro as a rune represents, with the feminine female energy behind it, as opposed to its meaning as a fate rune, as it were, or free will rune, or whatever you want to call it. Therefore it's referred to often as the rune of chance or the rune of mystery, because it is not quite so tangible to define, as you have hopefully figured out by my well, by what I have told you about it so far. So Perthro is basically, in terms of sexual energy, the opposite of Uruz, where Uruz is a very raw, very primal, masculine rune, very masculine energy, very go get it, the way male sexuality often works. And I say often because obviously I don't want to, generalize. It is a rune that is, along with Tiwas and Ingwas, Urus that is, they represent the masculine aspects and facets of traditional masculine sexuality and sexual energy. So opposing that, or working along with rather, as I would prefer to say it, is Perthro, along with Berkano and Lagus, representing the feminine aspects and facets of traditional, female feminine sexuality and sexual energy. So Perthro can be, as said, taken as representing the womb, or the vagina. These two parts are obviously unique to the female body. So that is the point where someone is obviously conceived through the union of male and female. And so that is obviously a very intrinsic part of the rune Perthro, both in its sexual aspect as well as its aspect relating to childbirth, because it's, well, without it, no one would be born, no one's weird would begin to be woven, and yeah, so that is the sexual aspect of it, or roughly so. I would go more in depth about that, but considering that we would probably be sitting here for at least 30 extra minutes, and this is just a 101 on divination mostly, I will leave it at that. And, moving on to the fate weird aspect of it. So since fate, in the sense as we know it today, in this, inescapable, predestined, preordained kind of thing, like, it's your fate to end up like this or like that, or God wills it, stuff like that. God took your kid because he needed another angel, stuff like that, which is, actually quite sickening if you think about it. But it did not exist to the ancient Germanic peoples like that. As I mentioned, it is a thing that was perceived as being a result of the actions of those who came before you, your parents, your ancestors, your tribe, your people, even your gods in some way. It is the actions that you are taking, that you are building your life upon and around, that you are building your life with, and that you are building the lives of your children upon. Because that is, after all, what is happening with everybody who, sires children. They are responsible for setting the, for building the foundation of someone's life. And if that foundation has not been properly established, then, the child starts off more rotten than he or she perhaps could have. So this is already a very huge impact that one can have. And, obviously it also represents, therefore, the, the actions of our children, the weird of our children, and, our descendants way off into the future. It represents free will, therefore, also, because you are partially responsible to how life around you is, because you influence it. In turn, you are also responsible for how you react to the decisions of other people. So this is where Perthro's free will aspect very strongly comes in. It is your stance in life in general, how you treat others, how you react to others treating you in a certain manner, that sort of thing. I think the point has been made. It is not so much a preordained kind of deal. It is very strongly focused on responsibility of one's own actions. It is very strongly focused on the feminine energies here. There is also a very strong focus on divination as well. That is actually a last point that I would try to address, because what you are doing when you perform divination is you are not foretelling the future. This is obviously something that hopefully most of you understand already, but a lot of people outside of the metaphysical community, they are often of this notion that people who are psychic, they try to tell the future, and that will inexplicably happen that way, just so. What they're not aware of is that divination merely traces the most prominent, most likely to happen energy that is currently on your path right now, and that you can actually change things so that you can change the outcome of particular things or influence them as much as possible. And that is actually oftentimes even the point of divination, so that you know that, oh, something's not going all that great right now from the looks of the energies that I'm seeing here, and I can take actions to change this. Now, obviously, your own expectations and your own energies can influence the reading, so one has to be in a very neutral state to read that properly, but yeah. Anyway, like I said, most of you already know this, I get it, but this is obviously also what this rune represents, given that it represents the weird of a person in this sense, and that it represents the cause and effect of our actions. And so, I have to say that one of the harshest lessons that I learned when I started off in divination, years ago, was that I basically took divination tools on their word, and I was obviously inexperienced, and I was, well, a little gullible, shall we say, because I took the cards on their word. And I'm not afraid to admit that. I think everybody who just started off has made this mistake, or most people, unless they had some proper guidance, which I partially had down the road that ended somewhere, and ever since then I've had to find my own path, and obviously I turned out pretty all right. But that is a word of caution that I would always include here, and I think that Pertho very well represents this. Take responsibility for your own actions. Don't be gullible. Use your head. Use common sense. Sometimes there are things outside of your control that you can't immediately work against or use to your advantage, but there is always a way. So these are, this is the basic rundown of what Perthro means as a general gist of of things, the general feeling of the rune. Perthro upright. What does it mean in divination? So Perthro upright can mean several things, depending on the context of the question or situation posed. It could mean the disclosure of a secret, that is to say, something that was hidden from you, or someone may even walk right up to you and tell you a secret. It could literally be as literal as that. It could mean the discovery of something that was once hidden, that is about to be revealed to you. Likely this is something pertaining to the particular question or situation that you are inquiring about. It can also be taken to imply that you should make up your mind regarding a situation. That it may be in your best interest to not seek guidance so much, but that you use your own head, that you use your own heart, and that you use your own intuition in this matter. That you are encouraged to be the person to, make the decision. That you do not leave it up to other people, perhaps, or that you do not seek so much guidance from, divination methods, stuff like that. That, however, does not in this context necessarily mean that that other person is necessarily wrong, or that you are necessarily right, but there may be, important things for you to learn if you, follow your own thinking in this case. And these things may be good lessons, they may be harsh lessons. it doesn't really matter, but they will, in the long run, perhaps be to your benefit, or most likely to your benefit. Um, so, in this case, Pertho Upright is encouraging you to risk a little. It is encouraging you to play that game of chance, that pot game. You're basically playing a bit of dice with your life decisions in this matter. It can also signify a pregnancy and or childbirth due to its relation to the feminine genitalia. However, this obviously also depends on the context of the question, because it would be really strange if Perthro showed up and you're asking about, am I going to get a job tomorrow? So that obviously does not make sense. So use your, use your head in that kind of deal. So when all is said and done, upright Perthro basically indicates to an individual that they should make their own decision in this matter, to let their intuition and common sense guide them. It also relates to magical practices, things having to do with fate or weird, as we have talked about. Therefore, it may possibly indicate that something that is happening right now is the result of a free will action that you or someone else that is asking you things to, divine, that is a result of their actions or of your actions, and that it is merely you being forced to take responsibility for the actions or choices that you have made in the past. That is to say, if, for example, you and then we move on to the upright Perthro example here, because that immediately ties in together. So suppose that you went out for a night of gambling with your friends, to stick with the theme of luck and a pot game and stuff like that. You end up gambling, for example, most of your savings away. Suppose that you had like $2,000 saved and you gamble away, I don't know, $1,900 in one night. And the week after that, your washing machine breaks down. Okay, and you are now in a bit of a financial bind, as these things are obviously not that cheap, and you only have $100 left in savings. And you consult the runes, and you ask them, how do I get out of this situation? What can I do? Will I get a job, or stuff like that. In this case, Perthro appears upright in the past slot of the reading, for example, and is here indicating that your free will decision, the decision that you made to, start gambling, has been at the roots of this. So it is basically saying, well, look here, you made a stupid decision, and this is what's happening right now, and likely you're going to be seeing, reverse Fehu, or, reverse Burkano, or stuff like that. Runes that basically have to do with wealth and the regaining of things, and regeneration and all that kind of thing. So imagine that kind of situation. And so here, so obviously has a double meaning, in that Perthro directly also relates to gambling in its meaning as a pot game. And it is literally saying, well, look, you gambled, you were being stupid. Okay, so for example, another example what we have is that one might find that if one is inquiring about whether or not a certain individual will make a good spouse for them, upright Perthro may appear in the challenge or present slot, so as to indicate that, while the other runes around it in the spread may indicate, hey, here's a couple factors that you want to keep in mind, take into consideration, such as sexual compatibility, financial issues, are they going to be a good parent, stuff like that. Runes that may appear that indicate things like that. Perthro is going to tell you, well, listen, ultimately this is your choice, this is your life's decision. But the future rune might then indicate, or the outcome rune or whatever, might then indicate that if you do decide to go with this individual, that this is likely to be the outcome the way things are now. Because again, with divination, that's very important to remember. It is the way the energy patterns are flowing right now. That is not to say that it will, by default, definitely, truly, always accurately happened out. Alright, so upright Perthro, the spiritual meaning. And as always, these are my personal interpretations, and a lot of people will draw more or different conclusions, and these are obviously not everything that I feel about this rune, but these are, some rundowns of my meditations, of my insights into it. So from the get-go, we can say that all things are connected because we all spring from the same thing, from the birth of the universe all the way to the end of it. The first cause, whatever that may be in your personal belief, will have a lasting effect through everything that happens in this universe, all the way up to the last second that this universe exists. So that is that orlog, that is that primal cause, that primal law that says we all spring from the same cause. We are all an effect of that same cause. And so our own actions will ripple on to all infinity and all eternity as well, until the very end of this physical universe. Because we can choose to treat our child well, and then the child will be more likely to grow up without, severe mental illnesses such as PTSD, or, that's not to say that all mental illnesses are parents' fault. Obviously, I study psychology, I understand that, but, what I'm saying is, if you give your child a good childhood, your childhood is likely to grow up with less issues, and therefore will in turn also be able to pass on the love and the kindness and the devotion that you have shown your child to their child, and it will cause a ripple through the generations that are to come. And the way you treat people around you has an influence on everything around you. And if you screw someone over so bad that they become a very bitter person, which again is also partially their responsibility, of course, but that person, had they never met you and you had never screwed them over, could have been perfectly fine for the rest of their lives, but now they are treating everybody else like shit. So, what I'm saying is everything is interconnected in some way, shape, or form. Now, I am not saying this in a manner that says that everything is love and light. I think I have discussed this many times in my videos. I do not believe that. I think there is a place for both the light and the dark, and I think there is a place for everything in some way, shape, or form. What I'm saying is, be aware of your actions and the influences they have, and this is obviously hard for everybody to do because we all have emotions. I mean, we are all influenced negatively sometime, somewhere, by someone, and we can ruin someone else's day because our day has already been ruined. I get it, but this is obviously something that we have to also take into consideration from other people, that if they are being nasty towards us, that's not necessarily something that has to do with us. It could be that they got screwed over by somebody else, and stuff like that. Another thing I would mention is that, as I have mentioned before, not everything is within our control. The universe is a very unpredictable place. Sometimes shit happens, as they say. And when shit happens, I think the best thing to do is to just go along with it. You try to make the best of this. You work your magic, perhaps literally, and you try to make, you try to shift the energetic tides around you. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, which we will get on later with the reverse meaning of Perthro. Because reverse Perthro is not so much about, the aspects of fate and your own free will, so much as that it is more about a restriction of it, of a limitation on that free will, on the energies that you can currently use. But anyway, we will get to there in a while. So, Perthro Converse Divination meaning. Perthro Converse to me generally indicates that there is an opposing will conflicting with your own. This does not necessarily have to be malicious, but it can be. It does not necessarily even know that the other individual whose will is conflicting with yours, that they know that you are actually even there working against them to begin with. It is also important to keep in mind that, again, like I said, even though it does not necessarily have to be malicious, it could be. And there may be, rivalries, lies, deceit, deception going on behind the scenes. That is obviously in the case of malice here, or in the case of adversity, case of working against your own will, which is done with the intent of interfering with your course of action or your happiness. And this may be the case, for example, with gossiping behind your back while acting nicely to your face if someone in your workplace is doing stuff like that. Your goals are being hindered. You must, put measures into place, basically, that allow you to reach your goal. You will likely have to fight a little to reach your goal, or sometimes you have to fight a lot. There's basically a element of hiddenness, of fishiness, of deception, of deceit. That's the general vibe I always get from a Converse Perthro. There are things you are not seeing that are working against you, and this could be as simple as a regulation or a law from a government agency, which is obviously usually nothing personal, but just something you may not be aware of. Or it could be something that is actively done against you. For example, a co-worker doesn't like you and starts gossiping about you. And this gossip reaches your manager or it reaches your boss, and you don't get that promotion that you were supposed to be getting in a week or something. So an example of Perthro Converse. A love triangle might be a situation in which one might encounter Converse Perthro. So suppose you fancy someone, right? And this person is also fancied by someone else. You're interested in the same person. This other individual, the third party, which is not your love interest, is asking your love interest out on dates, doing fun things with them, is attempting to win their heart in that way. So they're basically just trying to woo them. They're trying to, show how fun they are, that kind of thing. You are reluctant to make a move. You are not sure whether or not the person that is your love interest actually likes you. But if you do a rune reading about this, to find out what their feelings are and how they feel towards you, Converse Perthro may show up, and it may show that, hey, look, there's something else at play here that you may not even know about. Like, you may not even know that this other person exists. And it may show you then, like, hey, here, there's a will that is working against your own because you want to date this person. You're not really, getting off your ass and doing it. You're not trying to, actively engage them in romantic activities. And this rune then may be a signifier to you that there is something hidden from you that you are, going to be working against, and that is working against you as well. So Converse Perthro is hereby then calling upon you to take action in this sense. So Perthro Converse in a spiritual context. To me, it is about the logical road that free will takes, or tends to take. It is about both cooperation and competition to me. Because, like I said, it is a rune that, in this position, shows that there is a conflict of interest, a conflict of will. But obviously, there are always people that are in agreement with something that you are doing or feeling, whereas there are likely always going to be people that you are going to find are opposing you because they don't agree with what you're doing. So, not everyone shares the same morals and ideals as you, and that is okay, It is okay to not be okay with certain people having certain ideals and morals, or perhaps even a complete lack of morals. That's certainly okay to not be okay with that. And sometimes this means that one person, changes their stance on a matter, sometimes not. When, people get into a conflict, and some people may yield and say, hey, I see your point now. Some people may say, you have told me how you feel about things, but I still absolutely don't agree with it. Or sometimes they just really want something that you also want to have. And we have seen this through mankind's history. Tribes have warred with each other over resources, over a lot of things. So it is a integral part of nature of our free will and how we express it as a species on this planet that has driven mankind into both cooperation within the tribe or even with other tribes, and currently with other countries or with other individuals against another group that is not in agreement with us. So I mean, nature it is naturally competitive. I mean, look around you; it's everywhere. And it is not always possible to have love for everyone. You can't always agree to it. There will be conflicts of interest. That is the gist of it. That is the heart of this Rune, this position. And there are always going to be things that are outside of your control. I mean, you cannot control how everybody feels. That is why this excessive environment of we have to agree with everyone and everything nowadays, it is, in my personal opinion, just not healthy. It is healthy to disagree sometimes. It is healthy to form our own opinions, to form our own morals, to form our own existence, to form our own individuality. And there is nothing wrong with that in and of itself. And of course, there is the flip side to that, where sometimes someone's free will, sometimes someone's morals and mindset, or complete lack thereof, are a danger to society or a danger to other individuals, and it is also perfectly okay to work against those people. I would argue that it is especially okay to work against those people, like serial killers or rapists or, predators. Sexual predators I'm specifically referring to. Stuff like that. It is all, yeah. These are things that just harm other people. They simply exist for the satisfaction of the individual, while also doing incredible damage to the individuals that are being preyed upon by these people. Sometimes just outright taking their lives. And it is perfectly okay to stand up for those people and for your community and for yourself. Basically, Converse Perthro is, to me, an indicator that things really just, however, sometimes are not as black and white as we often like to think, as Christianity and other religions like it, the Abrahamic religion specifically, have always made things out to be. There is no duality in the world. There are very, very, very many shades of gray. There are things that are evil, and there are things that are good. And in between good and evil, there is a massive area where you just, each individual will have a different perception of these acts and of these stances. So. Alright, so lastly we come to Perthro Reverse and what it means in Divination. So to me, a reverse Perthro, seeing that appear in a rune spread, is about the limitation of free will, as I mentioned earlier. It is about a limited frame of movement within the web of weird, and in this case I feel that very strongly relates to nowadays, the rune of compulsion, the rune of need and necessity and restriction. So here we see that while we have free will, we are also influenced by the actions of others, and where upright Perthro is saying you have here an opportunity to make up your own mind, to make your own decision, to be the one to decide how the situation will unfold. Reverse Perthro is saying there's not really all that much that you can do about this the way things are right now. And yes, there's magic for that. But the way things are right now, the way things have flown so far, if nothing changes, you are going to be restricted. You are going to be forced to do some things that perhaps you may not like. It is not even necessarily about the not liking part. That's why I said perhaps you may not like, because all it may simply mean is you are restricted in your exercising of free will, of wanting to dictate how things unfold. So circumstances have forced the situation into the way it is now. You cannot really do much about it. You should, however, not find it impossible to do so, because there usually is a way out of a situation. There are obviously exceptions to it. But at the same time, I feel that Reverse Perthro is also a call to action. Because again, most of the time when you do a divination spread, it is the way things are right now. And that does not mean that you cannot bend the energetic flow to your will. So, you must do what you can, while at the same time, for the time being, suffering what you must until the situation changes. And whether that is because you are simply waiting, or whether that is because you have actively decided to, start taking a hand in the development of the situation as best as you are able to right now, that is obviously up to you to decide. So, an example of a Reverse Perthro in a rune spread would be that you are asking a question. Suppose that you are living in poverty, and you are asking the runes on advice regarding what to do in this situation, because you're sick of being poor, you're sick of being broke, you're sick of living paycheck to paycheck, trying to make ends meet. You're working, 2-3 jobs, whatever. But you lack education to find a decent job. You lack the money to afford said education in the first place, and none of your friends or family have, money at their disposal, and or they do not want to help you out for whatever reason. So your free will is being limited by circumstances here, and it will, probably then, in this case, in this example, appear in the past, the present, or the challenge rune. And in the past it would say like, hey, given the fact that you grew up in poverty and the fact that your family is poor and that they therefore couldn't afford an education and they didn't have the right connections to get you into a decent job environment, these were things that were beyond your control, and you were restrained in exercising your free will as a result of the weird that had been woven for you by your parents and everything else that came before and during their lives while they were growing up. So at the same time, it could also be challenge slot, because it could be saying to you, right now there isn't an immediate way out, but the surrounding runes may say, here's what you can do to improve your situation, but don't expect it to change immediately, and suffer through it for now, and eventually if you do the right things, take the right steps, things will hopefully get better. So Reverse Perthro in a spiritual context. Perthro reversed, it teaches us that sometimes all we have is our will when circumstances are not in our favor. However, where there is a will, there is always a way, as they say. We are never entirely restrained in our actions. Magic is one way of how we can deal with it, and I would argue that it is a very effective way if you know how to effectively utilize it. And this may seem very strange to a lot of people that don't actually practice magic. I've found, however, that very strange, very interesting things happen when you cast spells that are directed at changing lives, trying to better situations, making contracts with deities, stuff like that. Um, they are very interesting things to do when you are in a bit of a bind, shall we say. But, so magic is always a tool that we can use. It is always at our disposal. At the end of the day, really, all you need to do is have an open third eye. All you really need to be able to do is know how to meditate, know how to use your intuition, how to communicate with beings that are not physically in this world, shall we say. And you don't need fancy candles. You really don't need your incense. You don't need your herbs. You don't need your crystals. You don't need runes. But it helps, it helps, but you don't really need tools to practice it. You could theoretically practice it anywhere, anytime, no matter how poor you are. So that's a tool you have. We always have the capability within us to quote-unquote gamble with energy, to carry out a plan, to improve our lot in life. We always have the capability to attempt things. I mean, how many times do you hear of famous people who don't have a college education, who get rich because they invented something that nobody else has thought of before, stuff like that. And of course, not everybody gets that lucky, but again, there are tools in existence that can help force and change and shift the energy in our favor for that. So I would say that Perthro, regardless of what way it lays in a divination, it always suggests free will to us. You are only as limited, really, as you believe yourself to be. You can, even if a situation just is very restrictive, very restraining, you can still make waves, you can still make moves, you can still influence things, and you are never entirely at the mercy of opposing forces, at least not in everyday life. I mean, if you get like kidnapped or something, obviously that's a whole different story, but we're talking obviously not about such extreme circumstances. We are talking about everyday life here. And so you always have that possibility. You always have, in some way, shape, or form, freedom of movement. And I mean, I have personally I've seen the power of magical workings, and while it not always remedies everything, nor should it, because if that was the case, everybody would be practicing magic. It's a fantastic tool to change the seemingly unchangeable, I found. To cite an example of the sometimes restraining aspects of Perthro when it isn't reversed, there are two experiences I would like to share, and normally I don't do this because I always feel that interjecting my own personal things into these Rune videos is not really, I don't know, it doesn't really feel right a lot of the time, but for this one time I will try to make an exception here. I told you in a previous video in Iowa's that I lost a pet recently, and that he had a necrotic bladder, and they didn't know about this. So basically what happened was that he turned out to have urine crystals, and he was like, in pain constantly, and we brought him to the vet, and they were like, oh yeah, he has urine crystals. And we were like, oh, is that bad? And he's like, yeah, it could be, but you brought him to us in time. So we were hopeful. We shelled out the money, which was quite a lot. But, I now knew what was wrong with him, and I cast a spell on him, because he had to have surgery, and he had to have his blood values stabilized, so as to have his, penis removed. Because the urine crystals, they are common in female cats as well as in male cats, but women, because they have a vagina, which is a bigger opening, for men it causes problems because they have a smaller urinary tract. So basically they had to open him up and take off his penis and check everything and stuff like that. And we were like, all right, well, we'll leave him here for a couple days, and we hope his blood value stabilizes, because that's what needed to happen for the surgery to commence. And so I went home and I cast a spell, and I, obviously targeted him. And after 3 days, they said, "Oh, blood values have stabilized fantastically," and I was like, "Okay, that's nice." And well, the thing I, excuse me, the thing I addressed the spell towards, that actually cleared up within a couple days, and he was actually pretty close to death when we brought him there. We were actually told that you brought him in just in time, but what they did not know was on the day of the surgery when they opened him up that his bladder had been necrotic, and it was necrotic to such a point that it was literally falling apart as they were touching it, as they were feeling around in it. So yeah, even that spell that I did, it was too late. Okay, those healing energies could likely not have, reconstructed the body to such a degree that it had already decayed at that point. It had obviously been going around going on for quite a while. Although we do wonder, how he didn't actually show any signs except for a couple days before we actually took him in. Because initially we just thought that maybe he had some like diarrhea or something. And well, when we finally did take him in, but yeah, so that is an example where my magic and my free will were restrained. They were too late. I mean, what I did target did fix itself within a couple days, but yeah, the issue that was unseen was eventually what took him from us. And there's another instance where when I was in college last semester, and a friend of mine, her mom, who was like 70-year-old, or in her 70s somewhere, she was in the hospital, and I went home and I did a spell for her because she had heart problems and kidney problems, and she was rushed to the hospital and in the middle of class, and she just left prematurely. And I was like, you know what? Before she walked off, I was like, I'll do a spell for you because she's a witch, and I'm like, I'll see what I can do. And 2 days later, she made a miraculous recovery, and the doctors and the nurses, they were like, we did not expect you to recover this fast at your age. And I was like, okay, nice, because she told me that. I was like, all right, great, fantastic. And that was apparently a situation in which my magic was not restrained because I was there in time, and yeah, the energies did have the time and the chance to not afflict, because that would have been bad, but to affect this individual in a healthy, wholesome manner, And I'm not saying any of this to brag, by the way, because by what I've cited that first example, I'm literally just saying this as a this is a sort of precaution. Like, sometimes your magic won't work. It's just the way it is. Sometimes things are beyond your control in that sense, and you can just do nothing but work with the energies that have already asserted themselves and exerted themselves in this particular situation. Anyway, so thank you all for watching, because we have concluded Perthro, at least so far as the basic understanding of Perthro goes, I feel. And I hope you all learn something from this, and please do some research into Orlog and Weird if it interests you, because I feel that very strongly ties into Perthro, as I mentioned earlier. And well, next time we will be discussing Algiz, which is one of my very favorite runes, as I think I mentioned in Aiwaz. So it is the rune of divine protection, as I understand it. It is the rune of opportunities, which will then lead into the last rune of the second eight, Sowilo, the rune of victory, the rune of the sun, the rune of energy and revelation. So these are going to be two very interesting runes, just like I feel Perthro is. And I personally, actually, after making this video, feel that I understand Perthro a lot better than I did prior to making it. So again, thank you all for watching, and I hope to catch you next time with Algiz. Hail!